Shall we begin? Let's begin now. Let's begin now.
This is not a drill.
Repeat, this is not a drill.
Welcome to the show, everybody. This is LOL, where the left critiques itself and laughs out loud to keep itself from crying. I am your host, Craig Pasta Jardulin, and with me, of course, today is my good friend and my co-host, the professor himself, Jayme Kuzmarov, who is a professor at Tulsa Community College. Oh, wait, I got to move over here. At Tulsa Community College, but he also is the author of many books, including his new one, Warmonger. Professor, how you doing today?
Pretty good. Class is back in session, so fresh batch of students.
Fresh batch of students, fresh topics to talk about. Coming off a fresh Democratic convention, man. There's a lot of things to talk about. I stayed mostly in the streets to follow what was going on. I do have a little clip for you to play real quick, just so you can hear it and the audience can see it. How cheesy have the Democrats become? That is the question right now. I don't know if you saw this, Professor, but there's a little video they're playing where they were kind of channeling the power of of Queen. I don't know if you saw this, Professor. Let me play this for you real quick. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching out there. This is that crazy Democrats and their convention. Here we go. Ready? Professor, right after that, they showed a clip of them bombing Palestine. I don't know your initial thoughts on where you think the Democrats are, and coming off their convention. I mean, we have a lot of things to talk about. We have Leon Panetta, we have Kean Thompson, and what is it called? Propaganda or what is it? 2025 Plan 2025 by the Heritage Foundation. Project. I'm sorry, I can't even remember these latest attacks because I don't pay much close attention to it. A lot of things to talk about. Professor, your initial thoughts on the convention?
Well, I think we have two right-wing parties in the United States, and one is the Democratic Party, and that was signified that they had Leon Panetta out there, a former CIA director, quoting from Ronald Reagan, and William Kristol. I have an article all about that. William Kristol, the chief cheerleader of the Iraq War, tweeted Leon Panetta quoting Ronald Reagan, my type of Democratic convention. I mean, what party is this? You had the American politics is just totally screwed up. And I think it's a legacy of the McCarthy era that there's no real left in the country. They destroyed the left-wing movements, rooted in concern for working class people. You had the Republican Party. They were just attacking immigrants, scapegoating immigrants for the country's problems, and making it seem like all Mexican are murderers, criminals. And then you have the Democrats quoting, inviting a former CIA director, quoting Ronald Reagan and talking about how
let's get that clip, Professor. Let's show the people, because the establishment rolled out all their top dogs, including Leon Panetta, but AOC to Barack Obama. Chuck Schumer spoke. Nancy Pelosi spoke. Joe Biden spoke on the first day. He didn't really have a good time. They had incredible music guests out there. Stevie Wonder, and then Little John singing Turn Down for What? They also had comedians like Kean Thompson perform that Project 2025 bit, which we'll get into. But they didn't have any policy positions whatsoever. There was, in fact, somebody who was doing some interviews that were going around asking Democrats, delegates inside the convention, their favorite about their favorite Kamala policy. Nothing could come up. They couldn't say anything. This is where they're at. It's like they went after the low-hanging fruit. They also didn't let any Palestinians speak. But let's talk more about their warmongering mentality. This is Leon Panetta, and he spoke at the convention. This isn't the first time. He spoke in 2020. And they were booing him out, that they started, the boos were so loud that they started playing God Bless America on the microphone in Philadelphia. Listen to this.
My fellow Americans, I'm proud to have served in the Army, the Congress, the White House, Chief of Staff, CIA Director, and Secretary of Defense. I've looked into the eyes of our warriors and deployed them into battle. I gave the order directing our special operations forces to fly 2 helicopters 150 miles into Abbottabad at night. And by the time the sun rose, Osama bin Laden was dead.
All right. So, I mean, holy cow, Professor. I mean, last time they had to play this guy in 2020, he was booed so much. This can tell you, too, who the Democrats have gotten rid of and who's left behind. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, and it was 2016, and he was shilling then for Hillary Clinton. Yeah, and he's a key figure in the RussiaGate hoax. You know, he was one of the 50 former intelligence officials to claim that Hunter Biden laptop was a Russian disinformation operation, which we know based on FBI testimony is false. In his 2016 speech and in this speech, he was going off about the Russians and their interference. And, you know, he stoked Russophobia that's led to this toxic Russophobic climate in the country that's driven support among liberals and many in that convention for the criminal war in Ukraine that was provoked by the United States and the huge suffering of the Ukrainian and Russian population. And now they're striking into Russia. And, you know, Panetta was quoting Ronald Reagan and said, we can't return to the isolation in the 30s. Well, the United States was not isolation as it became an empire at the end of the 19th century when it acquired the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Cuba. And, you know, FDR engaged in a massive naval buildup that provoked the Pacific War. So, I mean, he doesn't know his history. Unfortunately, a lot of Americans don't. So they're cheering this guy, and he's just a war hawk. You know, they were, him and Harris, if you listen to their speech, they're attacking Trump from the right. They're saying, well, he's not tough enough on the Russians. He gave Putin a free pass. In fact, Trump had a very harsh anti-Russia policy. He pulled out of the INF treaty. He imposed sanctions from hell on Russia, and he sold Javelin anti-tank missiles to the Ukrainians, which Obama refused to do. And they're saying, oh, he was buddy, best friend with Putin. Well, it's normal for American presidents to meet. You know, Russia is a huge country, and in the Cold War, American president repeatedly met with Soviet leaders. So these are just extreme right-wing positions, and this is not a liberal party. And, you know, there's a lot of fluff at the convention and how diverse we are, but their policies are to the right of the Republican on foreign policy, even on the border. So this is disgusting.
We also have to talk about Kenan Thompson's performance because that was something special over there. The only attack they have, right? Like you said, they really don't talk about themselves because there's not much they can really talk about that is positive. So what they constantly do is try to scare Democratic voters into voting for them. Let's take a look at Kenan Thompson. We'll play a couple minutes of this over here. This was the attempt to, I mean, this was just, you want to talk about divisive in nature. This is the definition of it right here. While they brought people on the big screen who were what they called subject to those positions. Either they were gay, and then Donald Trump through Project 2025 wants to kill the gays, or what it can be. I mean, it was just crazy. This is Kenan Thompson over here at the convention. Take a look.
Y'all remember this big old book from before? When Colorado Governor Jared Polis ripped the page out of it? This is Project 2025. The Republican blueprint for a second Trump term. It is boo. It is a real document that you can read for yourself at kamalaharris.com/Project 2025.
Pause.
You ever seen a document?
He's going to make his little joke. He's going to say, well, we'll show his joke, but I had to pause it right there. Isn't it crazy that there are no, and we're going to play a little bit more of this, Professor, but there's no policies on Kamala Harris's website, but yet there's the whole thing about Project 2025. I mean, this is just bonkers to me, the fact that you can express where you feel on certain positions of policy, but all you can do is highlight your opponent. Where are we at nowadays when you hear rhetoric like this, Professor?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they have a legitimate critique of the Project 2025. It's fine to critique Trump and some of his policies, which are very regressive. But I agree
But
with
he's
you.
not signed on to Project 2025. I mean, this is a heritage foundation. It's not like he's going to enact everything in that book. They're trying to tie him to Project 2025 without him officially like endorsing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger problem is that they're not advancing their own vision, policy vision that's going to bring in, the middle American. They're going to be attracted to that policy agenda. I mean, in the past, the Democratic Party stood for the New Deal and policy that would benefit working Americans, support for labor rights and unions, support for regulation of the banking structure, the Glass-Steagall, support for higher minimum wage, better working conditions, etc. Public work projects, higher taxes on the wealthy to fund public work projects, to fund education and healthcare. If they advance that kind of agenda, most Americans, according to polling, support those kind of policies. But the Democratic Party has become more and more beholden to large corporate interests, and as such, they move towards simply promoting identity politics on an extreme way that divides people and that alienates people, promoting the culture war issues, and they're promoting a hawkish foreign policy because they receive as much money or more than the Republican from the major weapons contractors and from the Wall Street hedge funds that own the major weapons contractors. So this is not a progressive party. And as I was pointing out, on many issues, they're actually positioning themselves to the Republican Party to the right when it comes to foreign policy, even border issues. And that's what's extremely concerning to people like myself and others who are on the left who want a left-wing party and movement to support, and we don't have one. We have the Republican, who is an extreme right-wing organization, and the Democrats who are even to the right of them as on foreign policy.
Well, I don't know. I think we'll have a little bit of a difference when we say extreme right wing. I think they have some populist messages inside the Republican Party. At least there are members. We're going to bring that back up, please. We're going to play a little bit more of that. There are right wing members that are against the Ukraine war, that are pushing back against censorship. Let's play a little bit more of Kenan Thompson's video over here because this gets crazy. You have to watch this.
That could kill a small animal and democracy at the same time. Here it is. You know when you download an app and there are hundreds of pages there that you don't read, it's just the terms and conditions, and you just click agree, right? Well, these are the terms and conditions of a second Trump presidency. You vote for him, you vote for all of this. Let's take a look.
You vote for him, you vote for all of
right,
this.
do we got Matt here with us tonight? Is Matt here? Hey, there he is. Matt, how are you, sir? All right, Matt. Now, Matt, I understand that you work as an AV tech in Nevada, and you make a decent hourly wage. Is that right?
They could never fix his volume.
Oh, I don't know if we can hear Matt. Can we hear Matt? So who's going to fix it? Keep speaking, Matt, till we can hear you.
Just go to the next guy. Go to the next guy.
Uh-huh. Okay, that's good. I guess we're going to move on from Matt. And this is Becky. Becky, can we hear you?
Hi, Kenan. It's great to be here.
Thank you. All right, good. Now, Becky, you're married, correct?
I am. Me and my wife have been together for about 8 years.
Oh, that's amazing. Very, very cute.
Thanks.
But I have got some bad news for you.
I hate that.
On page 584, Project 2025 calls for the elimination of protections for LGBTQ plus Americans. So yeah, right back to the Stone Age. I'm afraid so.
Right back to the Stone Age. That's terrible.
Yeah, it is. Thank you, Becky, for being here and making that wonderful point. All right, next up, we have Nirvana. Nirvana, are you with us? And your people are with us as well? All right, good. Now, Nirvana, I understand
Yes.
that you are on insulin to manage your diabetes, yes?
Yes. And thanks to President Biden and Vice President Harris, I only pay $35 a month for my insulin.
That is great. That is great. But on page 465, Project 2025 calls for millions of people like yourself to pay more for prescription drugs like insulin.
Why?
Why? Well, I guess maybe to help Big Pharma make more money that they can donate to Republican politicians, I assume.
All right. That's enough of that. And it went on where they exploit people for who they are, their sexuality, their skin color, their religion, their job, whatever the case may be. And then tie it into, oh, it's Donald Trump who's coming after you. I mean, the fact that they're going to sit there, Jeremy, and they're going to try to make this argument that Big Pharma, the Republicans are in bed with Big Pharma, and the Democrats get nothing, from Big Pharma. I mean, all people have to do is go to opensecrets.com and they can see where all the money's coming from. Your thoughts on this avenue, this game they played over here? I mean, Kenan Thompson, I haven't seen it yet, but he got caught by the gray zone and got some questions there. This was really dark and divisive, I thought, what he was doing right here. Your thoughts, Professor?
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with your point. It's misleading if they're presenting it that only Republicans get money from Big Pharma. I mean, and what about the whole COVID issue? The Democrats were the strongest in league with Big Pharma as far as pushing these vaccines. So, I mean, it's just, political theater, really. I mean, there are, again, in my view, legitimate critiques of the Project 2021. I don't support the vision of the Republican Party in any way. But the Democrats, are hypocritical because they're often receiving money from these same financial interests. And they're really pushing right-wing policies, including the economic realm. I mean, the Biden administration never followed through on any of his promises, like for raising the minimum wage or student debt. And they've really adopted a kind of Republican-light policy over the last several generations. And it's been Democratic presidents who've cut core New Deal program. Like it was Clinton who gutted the welfare program with a cornerstone of the New Deal. It was the Clinton administration also that abolished the Glass-Steagall, regulating the banking structure, and that caused the financial crash, as even Clinton himself admitted. So, they're as bad as a Republican, really, in promoting pro-corporate policies. And in the realm of foreign policy, again, they were critiquing the Republicans from the right, and that's what I found very disturbing in that convention.
Yeah, I found it very disturbing. Another thing I found very disturbing was the fact that they didn't allow any Palestinian voices to go up and speak. They let everybody in the sun, every single establishment character, from Chuck Schumer to Nancy Pelosi. They got to speak. Doug Emhoff, Kamala's husband, got to speak. And Kamala's speech herself, once again, this is crazy because there is no policy positions on Kamala Harris's website. And that to me is crazy. Where would you say the mindset of people, where they're at? I mean, I had this video I was playing where somebody was walking around the Democratic convention and she was asking, people, what's your favorite Kamala policy position? And they couldn't come up with anything. What do people vote on, Professor?
Well, politics is always based on emotion, and that's been that way for a long, long time. And that's why the people who run the political system know how to manipulate people's emotions. And it's really run by the advertising industry. And I mean, they're trying to brand candidates like they brand products. So, and a lot of it now has to do with identity politics. So, Obama, you had the first black man, now you have the first black female, and they play up her mixed race background. And so black women automatically will identify with her regardless of her policy position, because she's promoting horrific policies, including in foreign policy that could lead to World War III. And that, for working people, it's our treasured tax dollar. Instead of going to benefit our communities, instead of education program for education, we need help. Our teachers are grossly underpaid. I mean, that's what people should be concerned about. But the marketing industry makes people identify with, oh, you have a black woman. This is amazing. I identify with her, or she's a tough prosecutor, or she's going to stand up to the attacks on LGBTQ and evil Trump. I mean, they make it like a professional wrestling. Trump is this evil villain character, and she represents good. They bring out Michelle Obama, and we go high when they go low, and we have the moral high ground, and we're so diverse, and look at us. This is America. And that's how they're packaging it. And it reaches a lot of people because they see it in kind of cartoonish WWF term that, Trump Vance are these bad guys, and they want to bring us back as far as race relations and LGBTQ. And I mean, they do say a lot of bad things, the Republican, and the Republicans have their own way of packaging themselves. And we're going to make America great again. And I mean, it's mostly just rhetoric. I mean, Trump economic policies are not making America great again. It favored the 1%. He was cutting taxes and allowing corporations to offshore their money. So he's not doing.
They had record stock buybacks by CEOs when he signed that. It was only broken by Biden. But here's the thing, Jeremy, when they did all the numbers, he was still better what the Democrats handed us. He was better on inflation. He was better on a lot of things. And in fact, the only thing that really helped the numbers for the Biden administration was the fact that we were coming out of COVID and people were going back to work. So he was counting those new jobs and kind of patterning the numbers. Let's play a little bit of Bernie Sanders really quickly. I want to talk about Bernie Sanders while we have just a couple minutes left over here. Bernie Sanders. Wow, how far the apple has fallen. You have something over here from the World Socialist website. The Democrats deploy Bernie Sanders to con workers and youth into supporting Harris-Walz campaign. I'll let you elaborate on this. What do you got here? And I'll give you 2 minutes and 20 seconds to do so.
Well, first, and the article continued that what I was saying, this is a right-wing ticket. And they blame Bernie that he's just being a shill. He had this, fake left-wing persona and veneer. I mean, that he's getting people who are more on the left to support a right-wing ticket. And he's just touting them when really they're going to sell out all left-wing principles. I mean, the Biden administration sold out all left-wing principles. He supported foreign wars. He favored the military-industrial complex. He never followed through on promises to cut student debt. Even his touted infrastructure bill was really very, very small amount of support for public infrastructure. So there's nothing a left winger would want here. No challenge to the corporate dominated order. So why is Bernie trying to get his people to support this right wing ticket? And he's making it seem like this is a progressive ticket that progressives should support when it's not.
Yeah, it's crazy how far there he is. The Bernard Sanders, ladies and gentlemen. It's very, very sad. Even when he gives his speeches, he'll call for a ceasefire, but he'll always mumble the fact that Israel has a right to protect itself. I mean, Kamala Harris did the same thing. AOC which was spoke on the first day. She said that Kamala Harris is working tirelessly, endlessly, or whatever she said, to bring about a ceasefire. What do they mean by that when they said they're working endlessly for a ceasefire? All you have to do is say, ceasefire, we're not going to arm you anymore. You need to stop bombing right away. We can't do this anymore. Professor, I'll give you 30 seconds. Go right ahead. Give us your final wrap-up of your thoughts on where the Democrats are today coming out of this convention in essence of looking at the 2024 election.
Well, again, yeah, and that's just rhetoric. They're not working tirelessly. They're giving all the weapons. They're working tirelessly to continue the war and to give all the weapons to them and the Ukrainians and to take the money away from the public to what the public needs, investment in education and healthcare. And that affects minority community the worst. So you have all these blacks cheering Kamala Harris, but she's selling them out, just like Obama did. So people have to get smart and vote based on the issues and not based on emotion. But the people who run politics know how to manipulate people, psychology, and that's what the game of politics really is all about. Unfortunately, you see it in both parties.
Thank you, Professor. You're the best. This is Craig Pasta-Jardula, Jayme Kuzmarov, LOL. We'll see you after the break. What are you doing? Oh, that's it. Right back. All right, we're going to take a quick break.
You have to run her.
That's it. We're still on. We're still going live. I don't know why we were supposed to go to a break. We're going to go to a quick break. We'll be right back. Thank you so much, Professor. I have a video that I filmed the other day with Clint Curtis. We're going to talk a little elections out here. Guys, you know what to do. Hit the like button, hit the share button. Help us on out. Pasta to go. LOL here with Jayme Kuzmarov, Pasta-Jardula. We'll be right back. All right. We are rolling. Welcome to the show, everybody. Craig Pasta Jardula. You got to see that over here. Bloop, bloop, bloop. I got the Meteor 2024. Just come hit us. The reason why I have that up there is not so much that I don't like any of the candidates involved, is the fact that I don't think we fixed our election systems at all. I think that we've actually moved in the wrong direction since 2020. There has been some knowledge. As you know, I went to the Capitol on January 6th because it was a Stop the Steal rally. And at the time, my friend Tim Canova was scheduled to speak, and I was trying to get on that stage to speak about what I experienced and what had happened. To me, even though I was a lifelong leftist, registered independent mostly, but every once in a while registered as a Democrat in 2016 so I can vote for Bernie Sanders, in 2020 so I can vote for Tulsi Gabbard. I almost said Hillary Clinton. Oh, my Lord. I wanted to vote for Tulsi Gabbard. I did register as a Democrat, but I was, mostly an independent, but a leftist. So I showed up at the Capitol, and people say, how could you show up at the Capitol at the Stop the Steal rally? Because at the end of the day, I believe that as an election integrity activist, you can't play team sports whatsoever. In other words, the process itself is just as important, if not more important. I should say just as important. It's more important than the results itself. In other words, if you have a fair system and a clean, transparent process, the results should then reflect that. So today I brought in a special guest. I've had him on before. I mean, when it comes to election integrity, this guy is one of the historic figures. He can fill in the void and the gaps where people have a lot of questions because he was part of history when it came to the whole voting machines. And we can speak a little bit about it. And there's different types of voting machines. I want to kind of emphasize that. We're going to get into everything today. But if you want to talk about election integrity, I've done events with this gentleman before. I've had him on the show. He's an amazing guy. Ladies and gentlemen, Clint Curtis is here with us today. Clint, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good. How are you doing, sir?
I'm hanging in there. All right.
Until the meteor strikes?
Until the meteor strikes. Well, Clint, let's just start off with some basic questions and go from there because I think it's important. Like I said, I'm doing these shows. I'm going to start doing these shows. I got the Meteor 2024 up there. Because you've said this before, we have to stop and fix this right here. If we want to have an actual representative democracy, before we can save the whales, before we can stop the oil drilling or end the wars, we got to fix this right here. Can you give us a little oomph behind that comment that you made a long time ago and why fixing our election system is so important?
I think if you saw January 6th, you probably pretty much know why. What's happening is that by trying to hide the system from the public and saying, we're the politicians, we'll take care of it, we'll tell you who wins, you just get to believe it. Nobody believes it. And so all over the country, 60, 70% do not think the elections are fair. It doesn't really matter if they are, if no one believes they are. And if you hide the ball all the time so that no one ever really gets to know, it's about the worst thing you could possibly do. And that's exactly what we do. In 2020, and I'm a Democrat, but in 2020, well, let's go to 2016. In 2016, the Democrats were calling it a horrible election that had been compromised by foreign countries. Everything was terrible. In 2020, it was the best election ever on the planet. What was the difference? Only the person that won. There's no other difference. They made it actually worse after 2020 than they've made it now. It was worse after 2016 because they keep trying to hide more and more things, thinking that people are just going to ignore it and eventually accept it. And that never really happens. I mean, it happened in Russia. Russia kind of has that sort of thing going on where they do that, but it doesn't happen here. So unless we fix the process, unless we actually get elections that everyone can trust in, whether you win or lose, but the process is correct, you can actually check it yourself, it's correct, then we don't really have a democracy. What we have is the same thing Russia has, where the big shots tell us who wins and we get to accept it. And if we don't, too bad, so sad, it's not going to change anyway.
Clint, I think you got to be careful when you start saying Russia has it. Russia has a much more cleaner, fairer, transparent system than we have. I know we'll have these disagreements here. I'm sorry. Russia doesn't have mail-in ballots, and that's something that Putin could sit there and look and laugh and goes, "We don't have these mail-in ballots and drop boxes and vote centers." Regardless, and I don't want to make this a discussion about Russia and China. You know how I feel about Russia and China. It's not that I love Russia and China. It's that I don't believe that we should ever point the finger at any country until we have our own house clean. And I think we both agree on that. And what you said right there was really, really important. I want to emphasize this because it's not so much that the election is fair. It's also, it has to be seen or understood that the election system itself is fair. In other words, not only is it fair, but the people have to understand and see the system and have trust in the system. Is that a correct assessment?
That's the correct assessment. People have to know it was counted properly in order to actually believe it. And that's not what's happened. Let's talk about Russia. Russia may not have all of the weirdness we have to confuse our elections, but they also don't let the public see them count anything. So essentially, it doesn't matter if everything is perfect. If they can't see the count and they can't verify it.
I do think they have public counting. I do think they have public counting. We're gonna
not
listen.
What I saw. Okay.
My friend Don DeBar, friend Don DeBar, he went there. He's an activist. He's a journalist. So he went and observed elections, and he was like, "Wow, this is really, really good." But let's hold that thought on public counting because that's just one aspect, right? Because there are different areas of the election system that are really, I think, a little bit messed up. There's the pre-election, right? The during the election, and then the post-election. The post-election meaning the count, right? Counting the vote. The pre-election, how do we get people registered? Is that fair? Can people easily access it? And then the process itself. What's the biggest area of concern when it comes to our elections? If Clint Curtis had a magic wand, and he can only fix one area of the election system, he had to start with one area, what area would that be?
If you can only fix one area, you can't fix the problem. Because if you have lots of areas that people are concerned about, you actually have to address all of those concerns. So let's take mail-in ballots. Mail-in ballots could be done well because you actually have a length of time to work with them. So if they are signed and you actually verify the signatures, not like what they did in Arizona, where if you scribbled your name, put a smiley face on it, they accepted the signature, that's not valid. Go back, check it against the records. We have computers that will do that to get you to the beginning step, right? Make sure the computer's doing it right, though. Don't just never trust a computer. A computer does what it's told. So the mail-in ballots could be fixed. As far as registration, a lot of people are afraid that there's a lot of illegal voters in the system, people from, that aren't actually citizens. And a lot of that can be true. As a immigration attorney in Florida, I had tons of people that had registered to vote because someone came to them and told them, you need to register to vote. It's okay. Well, it's not okay. In fact, what it will do is it'll get them deported. And even if they're a permanent resident who's been here 35 years, until they're a citizen, they can't vote. And once they register or vote in an election, they could be deported and sent back where they've never been for 30 years.
Yeah.
So it's a problem, but it's a problem in getting it out there. We need to explain that because, once these people were told that, they said, well, what can I do? How do I fix this? The answer to that is you can't fix it. Because if you try to become a citizen and you have registered to vote or voted, you cannot become a citizen. That is one of the big check boxes you can't go away from. So essentially, because someone wants to win and goes out and, gets these people to sign up, whether they are or not, but you could run that system against, we have this thing called E-Verify. You're familiar with E-Verify, right?
Yep.
Reagan wanted that back in, I don't know how many years ago Reagan was, but, part of his, we're going to give these people amnesty. We're going to set up E-Verify. And then when people come in, we're going to make sure if they're going to work, they use E-Verify.
Yep.
But it got watered down.
Yeah.
And now E-Verify becomes optional. And so most people don't use it. It's just that way, especially smaller employers that are more willing to hire these people that aren't legal will not be using E-Verify. And so that can be fair. You can run that. Go ahead.
There's just so many things to unpack, and I know you got a million things to say because listen, I've been doing this for quite some time. We met years and years ago. And I got some videos today I want to play you from the Venezuelan election. And it's not here that I brought Clint Curtis on to prove that the Venezuelan election was fair. I want to talk about it from an election integrity point of view as far as the process goes, so you can explain what's going on. But let's start with this. Let me say this much. Let's start with the mail-in ballots. So mail-in ballots could be fair. Could be fair, you said, if it's done in a proper way.
It's not done the proper way.
Yeah,
That's
it's not done
important.
the proper way. Let me just say this much. Nicaragua, and these are all the elections we have observed or covered. Nicaragua, Honduras, Colombia, Peru, Brazil, Mexico. I didn't go to Venezuela, but I know because my team was on the ground. Venezuela, none of those countries have mail-in ballots. Jimmy Carter said in a bipartisan commission with James Baker years ago, I don't know if it was 2014 or 2004. I get it mixed up, but it's definitely a 4. But they said the area most ripe for fraud is mail-in ballots. Even though you say it could be done in a fair way, the Democratic Party is looking to do what they did in 2020, and that's shotgun ballots. And we can talk about the list. And let's also hold that thought about the immigrant, too, because we have to talk about this because people don't understand. And you just brought out a very important point. You're an immigration lawyer, right? So and I say this all the time, that immigrants don't vote in mass. However, with automatic registration, in other words, in Arizona and in Nevada, if you sign up to get a license or you renew your license, and they allow immigrants to do so because they're going to be on the streets driving around, they should have a license, right? Regardless of where you're from. That automatically registers them for a ballot. And then with ballot harvesting, you've just created a problem that you'll never be able to fix. What percentage do you think of mail-in ballots could be allowed percentage-wise? I don't know. This might be a curveball because I said for an election to be valid, you have to have less than 5% mail-in ballots. What percentage would you say that needs to be done when it comes to mail-in ballots? In other words, would you emphasize, Clint Curtis, that mail-in ballots should be only used for those who are in very, very bad need overseas or whatnot? Give us a little insight on what percentage of mail-in ballots, even though you said it can be done fair. I think you would, I'm not a mind reader, but I know that Clint Curtis would say the fairest way to get back to the most transparent election is to get back into the precincts. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. The safest way to do it is in-person voting in the precincts. That's the safest way to do it because you actually verify the person. As far as, people that need to use a mail-in system, there would be ways to, especially if it was small, where people could go out and collect those ballots because there's some issues there. There's some ballot harvesting where, you can go into a nursing home and you take the person their ballot, you mark it any way you want to, and you send it in. And that's the total collective way it's actually verified. And that's no way to verify at all because the person coming into that place is a partisan person. If for those voters that you wanted to vote that way, you would actually use the system where, where the election administrator had a crew that went in with one Democrat, one Republican going to each one, letting the person mark it if they could, and they might not be able to. They may not really care. But if they go on these ballots and say, okay, you like Fred? I'm marking Fred, and the ballot's out. So that's not fair either. But essentially, you could use mail-in ballots if you did it correctly and actually wanted to verify them. You can use them. But most people don't want to verify them. They want to fudge them. Another problem with the mail-in ballots, and we saw this, I've done a lot of things all over the place. Saw this in Montana. We've seen this down in Florida, where the ballots come in, and usually they're like creased in something, so they really won't go through the machines very well. So those ballots are supposed to be reproduced, which can be done kind of in private, which is not good. And then the ballot is put in as the original ballot, but there's no verification back to the other one. So you can actually put in any ballot you want. And we saw this in Montana, and we actually had it on a little film. We were watching it, and they didn't know that the camera was running because they blocked out the bottom. But on this one little corner, you could see them coming in with their stack of ballots. And then, they already had these stacks prepared, putting them in and then opening the other ones and just shredding them as they open them. It's very efficient. You don't have to worry about reading anything, but does it really give you a sense that the election's going to be fair?
No.
And it isn't. And unless we have that, we don't have a democracy. We don't have a fair election because It doesn't matter if Biden won. It only matters if everyone who voted knows that Biden won.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if Trump wins. It only matters if everybody who voted knows that Trump won. And if they did, we wouldn't have that problem.
I think it's by design we have that problem. The next question's right up there. Should ballot harvesting be legal?
No, ballot harvesting should not be legal because it's putting.
You're a bad Democrat.
Hey, it's only because my guy won this time that they care, right?
Yeah.
Because, you always have the super weapon, right? The voting machines were the super weapon. Republicans, I was the guy who wrote that thing back in 2000, the machines with the flip right in there, and the Republican had the super weapon, right? But you never keep the super weapon. Both sides get it, or the other side gets a better one, but that's not the way democracy needs to be. It's not the guy with the best weapon or the guy who cheated the best. It's so that everyone knows what's going on. In fact, when I reported that, the guy who asked me to build the prototype for the electronic voting machines, I was a programmer at the time, and part of that was he wanted me to put the code in there that would allow the election to be flipped. When I started telling everybody, testified for Congress, took a polygraph, did the whole 9 yards, I told this to the DCCC, and the guy at the DCCC said, we should have thought that first. Not that's horrible, not that's terrible. We should have thought that first. And that's a lot of the mindset, and that is the problem.
Yeah.
They don't care about democracy, and they don't care about the people. They care if they win.
Okay, so let's get to that. That's great. We should have thought about that first, and that's what I try to explain to people. Is that now it's become a situation where both sides of the establishment, and that's even if they're not even playing together at this point, because some people think it's just one team. It's WWE wrestling at this point, but that's the way it's been now. It's like what side can cheat better. You know what I'm saying? To take the election. So when you said the guy from the DCCC is like, why didn't we think about that? All right. So listen, I want to talk about a little bit more about what's going on the front end. We'll get to counting in a little bit, but we have this situation in Venezuela where a lot of people within the United States are going, hold on a second. This guy is stealing the election. Nicolas Maduro is a dictator. Now, why would they say that? I think that because the ruling class, along with the oligarchs or the fascist government, meaning the merger of the corporation and the state together, the true meaning of fascist, really doesn't want to lose all that delicious oil in Venezuela and all those gold reserves, Clinton. So therefore, they got to say that it's awful. Now, one of the things they've been trying to do, and a lot of friends would contact me after 2020. I was very happy in a way because even though it wasn't people who were traditionally from my side, my clan, because I was a progressive for many years, it was a lot of Republicans. And on January 6th, that's why they showed up to the Capitol and stuff. But I was happy that the United States were going, wait a second, our election system's messed up. So now we had this whole Rudy Giuliani thing, a lot of these hearings. We got to hear from a lot of great citizens. But then, you have to be careful when parts of the establishment try to take the argument or the discussion one way. What they tried to do was say is that the flipping mechanism came from Hugo Chavez. And I'm like, wait a second, what year was that? I know a guy a couple of years before. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching the show, Clint Curtis, who's with us, he was the guy who was approached about creating a flipping mechanism in Florida years and years ago. What year was it when you were approached by?
2000.
Okay, so listen, this is Sidney Powell over here trying to talk, saying it was Hugo Chavez's fault. I have a saying now. We use this saying quite often. When socialism fails, it's socialism's fault. When capitalism fails, it's communism's fault. Take a look at this and give me your opinions on what she has to say, Clint.
I can hardly wait to put forth all the evidence we have collected on Dominion, starting with the fact it was created to produce altered voting results in Venezuela for Hugo Chavez, and then shipped internationally to manipulate votes for purchase in other countries, including this one. It was funded by money from Venezuela and Cuba, and China has a role in it also. We have staggering statistical evidence. We have staggering testimony from witnesses, including one who was personally in briefings when all of this was discussed and planned. beginning with Hugo Chavez and how it was designed there, and then saw it happening in this country. As soon as the state shut down on election night and stopped counting, those are the states where the most egregious problems occurred. We also need to look at, and we're beginning to collect evidence on the financial interests of some of the governors and secretaries of state who actually bought into the Dominion systems to line their own pockets by getting a voting machine in that would either make sure their election was successful or they got money for their family from it. Well, for fraud this serious, I think even if the states are stupid enough to go ahead and certify the votes where we know the machines were operating and producing altered election results, then they will be set aside by the fraud also. I mean, we are talking about hundreds of thousands of votes. President Trump won this election in a landslide. It's going to be irrefutable. Patriots are coming forward faster than we can collect their information with the testimony they're willing to give under oath about how their votes were stolen and how the machines operated. They were updated the night of the election, sometimes after the election. We've got statistical evidence that shows hundreds of thousands of votes being just put in and replicated. There needs to be a massive criminal investigation, and it's going to affect millions of voters and elections. And it's been organized and conducted with the help of Silicon Valley people, the big tech companies, the social media companies, and even the media companies.
Well, I think Chavez is dead, so I don't think he had a lot to do with it. But, is she right about there's all these errors out there? There is. There was in 2016. There was in 2012. If you use computers, you're never going to be able to trust it. You can hand count it. You can put it all on video so everybody can watch it, and then people can trust it. You can never trust computers unless you can accurately see how they did. And the only way to do that is to count the votes after they tell you the total. And why do that? Why not count them before they tell you the total, and then you don't need them at all? As far as investors in the company, yes, there are a lot of politicians that invested in these machines. And even if they didn't invest directly, they get a lot of, funneling into campaigns. There's a lot of money out there. But that's true with everything, not just machines, but, armaments, ammunition, all this kind of thing. They invest in these things. That's why they all become billionaires or something after they've been in government for about 10 years or so. Not because they stolen it directly, but because they know where to invest it. Insider trading is a sure to happy thing when you're in the Congress.
Oh, okay, so there's so many questions I have to ask. Now, by the way, they try to say this was in 2004 or 2006 that Hugo Chavez asked for the flipping mechanism. Your situation, and you guys can go look this up, Clint Curtis, when you testified before the Florida Congress, right? And before
U.S. Congress.
The U.S. Congress. And what year was that?
2004.
That's when you testified. When were you approached about it?
2000.
Okay, so this is years before. What I'm trying to show right now, and I'm not trying to be a Chavista over here and save Hugo Chavez, but I think it's just kind of crazy when they say these things. And I'm not even saying there's not even false players in these other states like China and Russia, which we, like I said, we've had this disagreements before. But for somebody to try to sell to me that a flipping mechanism would have never come about in the United States of America, we would have never thought about it. Our politicians are established that it had to come from a nefarious socialist, communist characters like Hugo Chavez is a slap in the face. How hard of the mechanism, the flipping mechanism, what they were asking you to do, how hard would it have been to create something like this?
Anybody could do it. It's very simple. The one I wrote is 24 lines of code. Flips an entire election, rewrites the logs, erases everything I want to erase, and gives you the total I want to give you. And there's nothing you can do to check it and nothing you can do to find it.
Here's my next question. This is something I'm trying to point out. They also made a point, Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, Dominion, 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 Dominion. Now, for those out there who don't know, Dominion was once Diebold, which was the company we found. And correct me if I'm wrong. Dominion was once Diebold. It was the company that we found that if the vote was cheated John Kerry and George Bush, a lot of people's in their eyes looked to Ohio, in which they said, okay, he stole Florida in the first election, he stole Ohio in the second election. That's who Diebold is. But there's three major companies. The other company, ES&S, has had a history of fraudulent behavior, and Smartmatic, which is the company. Well, first of all, that's the thing that I think that a lot of people don't understand that Sidney Powell got wrong. Dominion's not in Venezuela. It's Smartmatic. It's hello, you got the wrong company. But what I'm trying to say is that it's not the company, the machine. Those companies, and I know a friend who works at Dominion. Dominion actually has auditing software built into their machines. Is it not those who are using the machines and not the machines itself? Almost like the analogy, Clint, it's like a gun. It's not the gun itself, it's who's using the gun who we have to look at, and not the machine companies. Your thoughts?
Well, the point is you don't really know, do you? Because you can cheat it in a million ways. So the one I wrote went into machines and allowed someone to select who they wanted to win, and the machine would do it. It was internal code. You can also hack from the outside 1,000 different ways. They'll say, oh, it's not on the internet, which either means they know nothing about computers or they're just trying to lie to you. Because the internet is a protocol. It's HTTPS. It's what you send. But communication isn't just done over that network. Back in the old days, we used to network to the house wiring. So if you have all the machines plugged in the same basic grid, the same building, I can talk to every one of them, make them talk to each other. There's Bluetooth, there's radio waves, there's 1,000 different ways to talk to the computer. It doesn't have to have a wire going into the wall or a SID, because a lot of people think, oh, it's got wireless because I can see a SID, a little thing that I want to click on. The only reason that's in that little box is because the programmer put it in that little box. It doesn't do that automatically. So I can have 1,000 of them that you can never see. And it's just the way it is. Because you can't trust machines, we shouldn't use machines. And in Germany in 2004, they came to me and they said, what are we going to do? People don't trust it. And I went through the whole thing with them. Instead of going the opposite direction and trying to push people away from seeing what's going on, they actually did that. They actually got rid of the machines per their constitution now, and they can't use them anymore. And they hand count it one night.
Yep.
Not that hard.
And we'll get into the counting part too as well. So what you're saying is that anybody can cheat it with the machines, right? So it's really important that we understand how the state legislation or the county is using the machines, because they can just, hey, Dominion, thank you very much. Dominion can never be involved. They can use that machine and cheat with that machine because they have all the ins and outs. Or they use Dominion, and somebody from Dominion, since we don't know who the what is it, the stakeholders or because most of these companies are private equity, right? So it's like a zombie company of a zombie company. We don't really know
You'll never know.
Calling the shots at ES&S and Smartmatic. So we should also understand that even though their ownership is proprietary, it shouldn't be. We should know who owns the machines, all the gateways in and out. I mean, the best way would be, I think, to just eliminate the machines altogether, or to have a source tabulator at each precinct, at each room, to match the hand count there in person. And we can do a hand count. It's very, for me, as a guy who's gone and seen 6 international elections, it's like, this is easy. This might not be the oldest scam, but this is the biggest scam, because we can have results that night, get the people involved, and get this done where everybody has confidence in the system, and yet we're not doing it on purpose. Any final comment on this subject before I ask the next question? Because the next one, people don't plug this in, which I'm going to ask you about Hava. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, that is true. If you go to this website, handcountusa.com, it's got the stuff we did where we actually showed a hand count real quick, real fast, couple of volunteers, and it's all videotaped so everybody can count it as they're going. So everybody is in on the game.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about any sort of FOIA request because they've got everything. Everyone will know whether they won or lost. Every candidate that, doesn't think he won will actually be able to sit down and see every ballot and every vote and know that worked. And it's really simple and really easy, and it's the last thing they want to do. Another thing, we're talking about machines. I was looking at this down in Texas, and we were talking about this. And we were looking at this one little brick in time of a thing down in, where was it? Congressional 22 in Texas. And there was the candidate that was running. He was the independent running. And he was taking screenshots as it went along, right? Because he wanted to see how he was doing. So he got lucky, and he took screenshots at 8:03 p.m. on every county count. At that particular moment in time, the Democrat and the independent had exactly the same number of votes. Not the same percentage, exactly the same number of votes. So in some of these little tiny counties where there's like 20 voters, they would each have 5. And in other counties that were larger, they would each have 2,609. Exactly. At 8:03 p.m. in 8 different counties using 3 different vendors. So who's pulling the buttons there?
Yeah, 3 vendors. 3 vendors.
And it was an R5 district. So if it was a Republican trying to cheat, he didn't need to. It's an R5 district. He's going to win.
Yeah. I would also like to point out, going back to what we said at the beginning of this show, my first question, which was a trick question, and you got me. I can't get you, Clint. Which area, if you can only reform one area, which area would you reform? It's not going to work because there's so many parts to reform. If we want to have public and county networks, we got to make sure that the system itself beforehand works. In Honduras, in Nicaragua, in a lot of these countries, you have to go to your designated precinct. You have to bring your ID. You have to vote, and when you vote, you put they put a blue ink on your thumb, so you can't vote, and it's done in the purview of the people. And then they take those ballots out, they count in front of everybody. But everything has to be fair leading up. In other words, I say you don't need a voter to cheat an election now, Clint. All you need is a ballot. And we found ways where they've been able to mass produce ballots now. I mean, in the Arizona election we talked about, the one that Kerry Lake, I believe, won. I believe also Mark Fincham, our friend, won. I don't know if he's your friend. He's my friend for sure. But we've seen him. We've been in a room with him before. And even though he's a Republican, he's opened the door to guys like me and you and say, educate me. How do we get this better? And that's what we need. Steve Merchant was the only Republican I've ever voted for. That was in 2022 in an election in Nevada because I was living there at the time. Once again, a Republican, a Trumper. We don't agree on immigration. We don't agree on abortion. We don't agree on a lot of things. But in elections, he understood it's not a partisan issue. It's nonpartisan. So for this to work, so many things have to be in play, and we can get it done. The hard thing is that people say, well, how can we do that? How can we count on these things? I've seen it. We can get it done. So just to kind of follow up on what you're saying, that hand counting does work, but all those other systems have to be in play beforehand. Vote centers, in my mind, need to go. It has to be a precinct. You have to go to your designated spot because vote centers create the problem that now you cannot audit this because you don't know where the person voted. And that's why they do those things to make it harder to audit. What about HAVA? How does HAVA play into fraud?
Well, essentially what it does is it gives a funding mechanism where the federal government can tell you what to do in order to get the money. So if you want the money to do it, you have to kind of do it their way. So they can make you do machines. They can make you do the certification issue. They can go through this whole process of convoluting what you want to do in order to get paid for it. So it's kind of like highway funds. So very bad idea. They'd be better off to do a hand count and pay for it themselves. They'd have a better election and the people would believe in it. And if the people don't believe in it, it doesn't matter. Good way to also funnel money to these companies, which can also, push it around. The more money you push around, the more they end up with. So generally just a bad idea.
So what you're saying is that HAVA is a system in which the states get money from the federal government, but to get that money, they got to use their software, go along with their programs and their plans. In other words, for them to get the money, and this is, once again, they have to play by the rules that are set by the federal government, by the EAS, or the EA, who is it? The EAS or who sets the rules?
I'm not certain on a lot of them are congressional insight things. You know, they have these meetings and it's finally set up. I don't know exactly how the rules are promulgated there, but you know, it's just whatever they want to do. And they have to take suggestions, like they add security, right?
Can you say that again? You got really.
Oh, they added something about security into the new rule system. Okay, at about the same time, DHS, you know DHS, right? They offered to these counties that they would give the security needed that would satisfy this new requirement for free as long as they could monitor everything in their system. And the contracts actually read, because I read one out of Texas, is they're allowed to change, modify, or alter anything within the election system. They didn't even rule out altering the results, anything. So they've kind of given it away. I mean, the states were kind of like, you know, we need this sort of security that they won't be able to give, of course. And lo and behold, someone came by with the answer, DHS. So now DHS, even though it's a county, you know, the counties and the states are supposed to run it, most of them have handed over to DHS to run.
Crazy.
Pretty sad, huh?
Crazy. I was looking to play you, and I wanted to play it out, but I just realized that Twitter has taken down my tweet from the Venezuelan election. Unbelievable. Free speech, yet they've taken it down. Clint, I got to tell you, and you know this too more than anybody, how hard is it to be an election integrity activist? I mean, once again, I shared different opinions than the Democratic Party did about COVID, and they made that almost impossible. But this is a leftist talking about COVID the way he is. Get him out of here. But I'd already had the X on my back and marks on my back from elections. Now they literally took down what I put down and explaining the process in Venezuela, where it's this. And I want you to give me your opinions on it because it's really, really important. I'm not, once again, I did not bring on Clint Curtis to say whether or not the Venezuelan election system is fair and it's an actual election. I just wanted his opinion on the process itself to compare it to what we're doing. Now, where they have issues, the Carter Center, which is not the Carter Institution anymore, it's different than Jimmy Carter. It's actually been co-opted by different groups. But they said the area in which the election was fraudulent is the pre-election. In other words, leaving the majority candidate of the opposition off the ballot, the CNE putting their foot, which is their election commission, putting on their foot, helping out the Chavistas, not helping out the other party, and not allowing migrants, Venezuelan immigrants, Venezuelans who don't live in Venezuela, in other words, to vote. In other words, there's supposedly close to 6.5 million Venezuelans living outside of Venezuela. Only 500,000 of them will get to vote, and that's what they're saying cost the opposition the elections. But this is the system itself, Clint. You have to show up on one day, it's a Sunday, at your designated precinct with ID. You go into the room. There's rooms for each person where they have to vote. In other words, they use a school, and each room has a list of close to 400 voters, and they don't overload it. Usually, each precinct. That's what they did in Honduras, and that's what they did in Nicaragua. Each room in each school had 400 ballots. Each one in Venezuela, there's no actual ballot. It's a DRE machine, which is a direct recorded electronic device for those out there. It's like a cash register. When they open up the precinct, they show that the machine is registered out to 0. Everybody comes in and votes. It's a touch screen. And you're only voting for one person, president of Venezuela. So they don't clout this thing, because I know you probably have a lot to say about the fact that when somebody goes to vote, they got to vote for 76 positions. You know, assistant dog catcher to the city who's, you know what I'm saying? It's ridiculous. I think they do that on purpose. You got to vote for judges you know nothing about. You vote for one person. It's a touch screen. They hit the touch screen. It asks you, are you sure this is the guy or girl you want to vote for? You say yes. And it puts out that ballot. They walk that in, that little paper receipt, and they put that in another ballot, a ballot box. It's not the same machine they use, but it's a separate ballot box. And this is all done from the purview of the people. At the end of the day, when they close the polls, each machine spits out a result. This is how many people voted for Chavez. This is how many people voted for the opposition. In this case, it was Nicolas Maduro versus the Karina Marina Machado's chosen person. I forgot his name, Eduardo something. And they'll then do a random audit where they'll pick 54% of the machines of the ballot boxes, and they'll open up those ballot boxes and in front of everybody count it to make sure that the printed receipt, which they'll put in front of every single door, matches, and 54% matches, and then they report it to the centralized tabulation place, which then they give the results. Now, you said to me, and the first thing that I said too, I'm like, yeah, but they should go to 100% of an audit because they can probably get it done. But 54% is still better than nothing. It's a lot better than we have. What would you rate that system on a grading if you were to grade it? If you're grading on a curve, Professor Curtis, compare to our system, do we have a right as Americans to complain about the Venezuelan system? Go right ahead.
Our system is not good. That system looks better, but it isn't better because people still don't trust it. And the reason they don't trust it because they're not doing 100%. Because you have to go through a complicated computer to print it. I am sure that if they gave people pencils and a paper, it would probably be a little better. Because why do you need to push a button to select somebody so it can print out a receipt that you probably can't read because it's probably a barcode? So you can put that in another box where manipulation could occur, and then you're going to count it, and then you're going to limit it to 54%. Because if you limit to 54%, can't you kind of pre-select what you want to have? The computer certainly could. And it will know what it
That's why it was important that we were voted so we can see how that audit worked. That was the main thing, the public counting and the audit. I still think it's a good system. It could be better, but go ahead.
Well, it's a different system, but it's not better unless you can prove to the people that it is. And it's not. People are rioting, people are dying. Obviously, they don't believe it. So even if it's correct, it's no good. Which is why I try to tell people, a lot of people, I was talking to people in South Korea, I did a video for them, and they had this machine with super encryption this, super encryption that, double encrypted. You go in, you just use your thumbprint because they're going to take your thumbprint, which wouldn't go in the United States, of course, because we don't give away thumbprints, but they do there. Give your thumbprint so they know who it is, and then the machine will give you the answer. No one's going to believe that, right?
Yeah.
Because the machine gives you the answer.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. It can't be the machine give you the answer. So if you do 54%, I could probably do 70% and still cheat your election. Because if I know where I want to do it and what I want to hit, I can do that. As far as expatriates not being able to do it, not being able to vote, that happens in a lot of places. We allow it. We allow our citizens if they're in Japan or where else, because, we're all over the place. But most countries really don't. They don't want someone whose address is actually London, England, to be influencing their local politics, and they just don't let them vote. So that sounds like a complaint just to complain, because it doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, like you're saying, people are rioting and things. And let me be honest with you, too, as well. That's a lot of Americans, once again, funding the opposition, coups. We do this all the time. So they're the ones creating the uprising. I think their system's good. It just needs to be corrected. But you're right. And this is something I pointed out. For the Chavistas to cheat it, they're going to have to know which 54% of the audit was taking place. Because if they were doing those audits and those audits weren't matching up, you would have seen pictures and videos going, look at this audit. It's not matching up. This machine's not matching up. We didn't have that. So we have created a situation where there's a quagmire because you're right. If we don't get to 100%. However, if we're grading on a curve, though, Clint, I'm sorry. Venezuela is one of the better elections out there, especially compared to what we got, because you have to go to a designated spot with ID, vote in person, get your thumb marked with ink. It's all done in the purview of the people. Like in Nicaragua, the chain of custody starts at the door. They have 400 ballots in each room. So when they're done and each person goes to their designated precinct and they vote, if there's 250 ballots that are voted, there have to be 150 ballots left. And they do that count in front of the people to let them know that the math is there. That's why Nicaragua's system is the best system I've seen so far. Public counting in front of everybody. They post it out in front of the doors. If you're part of the opposition right now, in other words, if I was in Venezuela and I was working for the opposition, I would have 2 people at every polling place because they have to put the results on the door on the outside of each table where you vote. I would have people take pictures of each one and you would have a roadmap. You know where your bread is buttered. You know where your votes are coming from. You know where it's weak. So if there was funny business going on, would you at least agree somewhat that these elections, the fraud could be caught in real time? In other words, they could say, we want this machine flagged, and we want this machine audited. These numbers are not right.
Well, it depends on what you do with the whole machine. The machine that no one's actually voting here, but the machine, because you're pushing your little button, right?
Yeah.
The program I wrote, they pushed a little button. I wrote the first one for the DREs, right? You pushed a button and it said who you selected. At that time, a lot of people complained because they said, well, you could see it switch. Well, that's bad programming. It doesn't matter what this screen says. It only matters what I say. So I may let you think that you voted for Fred and I record Sally down here. Okay, so then I can print Sally out and I can make it all balance in the back end, because all you're getting is, this is my machine. And now I'm putting this little receipt in, which was a problem with the little belts on the side, because they tried it with DR. Well, we'll just have it so they can see what they did. And since that's on paper, they'll be able to verify that that's correct. It is, except the computer doesn't work that way. Computer isn't that linear. Computer can work any way it wants to. So if I have the way you voted, I not only have the way you voted, I know that number 56 voted that way too. And that's who I'll show you. And then I'll vote what I want to at the end. So your verification isn't real. Their verification isn't real. Lose the system, mark it, have it hand counted. Think of all the money they save with all the systems, and probably just the blue ink. They don't even need that necessarily. If you get them down, you get them in there. The blue ink is a feel-good measure, but I don't know if it really matters. They should have blue fingers. But do it right. If you've got your front end taken care of, which it sounds like they're that way, now they have to take the back end, and then people will know. Another thing I saw about Venezuela is they were complaining because the polls didn't match, the exit polls. Well, we had exit polls until 2004 when they no longer matched. And then what did we do? Did we go, oh, exit polls don't match, something's wrong. We got rid of the exit polls. So we still hold other countries to exit polls, but we don't use them. Because
that's because they didn't want us catching the fraud. Let's be honest. That's because they want. Listen. I just pulled this up. Take a look at this really quickly, Clint, because you're gonna like this. Election junkies love this stuff. So let me show you how the system works. Let me remove the banner so you can see it all in its glory. So this is actual footage. I'm going to start over here. They come in with their ID. They have can you see this stuff? They have, you can't take your phone in. You got to put your phone down. They show you the ballot. This is how the ballot is. They then you've already used your ID to get in. You had to show your ID. Now they're going to use your thumbprint identification on top of it to match your ID. They're going to explain to you how the ballot is. Now, here we go. She has your ID. Here's your thumbprint identification. Bloop. Okay, so you're the actual.
So they have everybody's thumbprint in this country?
Why is that?
They have everybody's thumbprint?
Well, you have to give your thumbprint to vote, to register the vote, to get your national ID. So you have to get that. You have to. That's why what had happened was, let me pause this real quickly, was that the grassroots understood that the best way to win an election is one person, one vote. The easiest way for the ruling class to cheat an election is if they can create votes once again, right? So if you don't have one person, one vote, this is the way they can cheat an election. That's why it's interesting, because even though in America, we're always like, oh, thumbprint identifications, that's ridiculous. You're going too far right now. They don't want any track and trace programs. Democrats aren't like that. Mostly independents and conservatives. They don't want too many track and trace programs. But in the grassroots, because they understood if they get to one person, one vote, that's the easiest way for them to win an election. Take a look and watch the rest real quick. He's going to go in there real quick, Clint. He's going to make a vote. He's going to take his little receipt out. Now, this is all done in the purview of the people, and he's going to put it in that box. And he's going to go over. He's going to sign. He's going to put the ink matching his ID on that line. Boom. Now that ink doesn't go away for at least a day and a half, 2 days.
Okay.
So making it almost impossible to go and cheat and vote somewhere else.
Well, the first part's okay. The back part's okay. Why the machine, and why do you have it print a little thing? Why can't he just mark it and stick it in there? Well, what's the whole point of having the machine do anything? Because if you're going to audit it anyway, then audit it. You can tell a circle on a piece of paper. You don't need a computer to do it. So what is the purpose in even having that? And if they have that, why do they have it? What's going on there? Because there's got to be a reason why you think you need to not just mark a bubble and put that in, as opposed to making it go through this whole process. You're going to need a printer. You're going to need a computer. You're going to need software. You're going to need the thing, plugged
You're
in.
a Floridian saying this with the whole hanging chad. They used the whole, why do we go into electric? I mean, our country went to it because we said, the Help America Vote Act, right, was about getting the money because we had to go to computers because of the hanging chad reason. I think that was a setup the whole time, by the way.
It was.
And just so you know, there's a
Did you
polling
see that?
place you can see right here. Very easy. Go ahead, buddy.
Did you see the Dan Rather thing on the hanging chad? He did a
No.
report on it. He did a report on it.
Years ago. Yeah.
Okay, he hadn't been around. But anyway, basically what they did is Jeb Bush actually invented the hanging chad by changing the paper to a thinner paper and changing the cut to something that wouldn't poke out. They never had a hanging chad problem before that election. So
it was a
I created a solution to a problem that they then created.
Yeah. It was a manufactured problem, so they can usher in the Help America Vote Act, so the establishment can cheat elections on both sides of the aisle.
Yep.
You're absolutely right. And at the end of the day, like I said, Nicaragua, the only time they have computers in Nicaragua, two areas. Number one, when you go to check in to make sure that you're in the registration, they have all your written information. But that's the only place when you check in where they have computers to verify that you are who you are, right? And that this is your location. But when you go into the booth, when you go into the room, the mesa in Colombia, the junta in Nicaragua, there's no computers in there. It's all done by hand. And here's the thing that really is crazy, Clint. The number one rule, when I asked Cynthia McKinney about elections, what's the number one most important rule to fixing an election system, she says we got to get the people involved. Why do we outsource so much of our work for these elections to these companies and spend money on it when we have so many citizens that are like, pick me, pick me? If we had the majority of citizens on one day of voting on a Sunday, on a holiday, like all these countries do, it would be so much better, would it not?
It would. And it's not even that hard to get people. You don't have to have volunteers. If you look at the system they have in Germany, they don't depend on volunteers. They do it just like the jury system. They do get more volunteers to do that because if you do the elections, you don't get selected for the jury duty. And if you've ever been on jury duty, you probably want to avoid that. So everyone wants to do elections because nobody wants to get stuck with jury duty. But you go in, you do your 3 hours of counting, and you go away. And if you do it on video, you do it on camera, because that's a big thing, because the people behind the scenes can be a problem as well. There can be something going on there you don't want to have going on there, because it's hard to know what to trust. So have that done, have it done live. I've been trying, since they didn't accept the whole calculator method, which does it all. If just for this election, because there's a way to cheat this too, I can get into that later, but just for this election, they won't get to it. But if they actually took the ballots before they sent them through the tabulator and just thumb through them on video, people could go back and have a source that the machine can't cheat, because it's going to give you your total before the machine touches it. So if you cheat in the machine, you got a problem. If you cheat anywhere else along the line, you have a problem, because as it comes in, you do that. Same way with your mail-in ballots, because with a mail-in ballot, if you have to redo it, you don't know it's done right. In fact, there's a lot of places that say, got a lot of room to fudge. But if you take it out of your envelope, not so they can see it, but you take out your envelope and you lay it down and you flash through them, you will then have an actual photographic record of every ballot and every vote that every citizen can see. And that would basically shut down whoever wants to cheat on whatever end.
Final
and very
question.
cheap to do.
Final
Say
question
what?
for today. And we're going to have you back again. We're going to probably have a lot of conversations between now and the election. There's a lot of stuff going on. I have individual stories from individual counties and individual states. The two areas where there seems to be more of an uprising where the citizens are saying no, no, no is in Georgia and Florida. There's a lot of push from people over there. And I know the media and the government is trying to make this, it's just Republicans, somewhat domestic terrorists that intimidate people at the polls are the ones trying to push for these reforms. However, they're being fair and honest in their reforms. I mean, you see a lot of the things, their demands, like I was at the DNC convention and I asked the protesters what their demands are. Number one, ceasefire. Number two, go on and on and on, right? But they have a clear plan of what they want. Stop the killing right now. Let's move this and then move along. A lot of the things that the demands that these protesters want is they want no more ballot harvesting. They want a hand count. And they want you to show up at your designated precinct so they can vote, and they want to limit the amount of mail-in ballots, because mail-in ballots is not just the problem with the ballots itself, it's the problem with the voter rolls, right? Like, that's how we can generate more ballots over there. We just fudge the voter rolls. And in states like Arizona, in Kerry Lake's election, nobody even knew. I forgot the other woman's name who she beat, but they literally had voting lists. If you voted in the last 12 years, you automatically got a ballot. And I think in Maricopa County, which is the largest county, the majority of the voters in Arizona, 1.8 million ballots were mailed out, only 0.8 were turned in. That literally means 1 million ballots are floating around. And that just shows you there's too many ballots that are accessible that somebody can take and turn in. I could take them, fill them out, and turn them in. Ballot harvesting is legal. I can do it. So here's my final question to you. And that's tipping my hat off to the Floridians and the people in Georgia who are doing the fight. I'm sure there's other people in other counties that are fighting too as well that I haven't mentioned. We'll hear their stories. We'll talk about their stories. When Clint has time to come in and give us his analysis, we will do so. And if you're watching this now, you'll see in the beginning of this video, we will also insert Clint's testimony to Congress. That's how this video is going to start off, just so you know, Clint. But here's my final question. Are we better off today with our election system than we were in 2020?
Absolutely not. We're worse off because they've gone to more lengths to keep the people from even asking questions. Before, we were asked questions for years, right? Before it's just, we were an annoyance. Now, if you dare to challenge their elections, you're a criminal. And that's a real problem because they're going to take away any ability to challenge the elections. They're going to put the machines in harder. We're in a world of hurt. And the problem is that won't eventually work for them. I think that, America will rise up and start, some sort of horrible guerrilla war killing people all over the place. That's eventually what we'll probably go to unless they can squish us down and make us go away. But I don't think that's going to happen. I don't see that.
They've made it very tribal. They've made it very tribal. These are the domestic terrorism who showed up on January 6th, who tried to overtake the government. A bunch of Second Amendment gun nuts, but they forgot to bring their guns that day when they were trying to overturn the government. I was there, and I can tell you this was fabricated. This was false. I'm not saying that people didn't break the law, but it wasn't the majority of people there. And it seems like it was definitely meant to be a false flag so they can do these things, so they can further continue to silence you, to talk about elections, to make you a criminal. They call it the big lie. And the thing about it is right now they're pointing the finger at the Trumpers and the Republicans, but it was guys like me and you. Well, you did this way before me. You were one of the first guys I looked into as my mentors years ago and saying, you know who Clint Curtis is? Look at this. Do you know who this person is? Look at that. The thing about it is they've really, like you said, they've criminalized it. And some of the rules that were temporary rules for COVID have now been made permanent in areas like Clark County, Nevada, and Maricopa County, Arizona. So they have the mechanism in play to give us the results that they want. And here's something very important to point out that I think, and I would like you to give a little comment on this, and we'll finish up the show as we're hitting the hour mark. Joe Biden won the top of the ticket in 2020. Won. Okay. The Republicans won the coattails. And I tell people this is not about a Republican, it's the establishment, because the Republicans won the coattails. Traditionally, if the top of the ticket, whoever wins, they get the coattails. You want to close us on out? We're talking about that particular situation and any final words you have to say about elections moving forward. Please, Clint.
Well, obviously the elections weren't very good in 2020 or 2016. Volusia County, they have more voters and more votes than voters. It's been that way forever. Who's in charge? I don't know, but I know it's not the people, and they are being limited more and more every day on regulating this. So pretty soon, it's just going to be, they're going to tell us who's in charge, which is kind of that way anyway, I'd say for the last 20 years, and we get to deal with it. And that's where we are. So we are in a world of hurt right now and getting worse.
Anything we can do right now to fix it?
If you care about elections, then I would say contact the people in the top of the ticket that's running for you and see if you can't get them to try and make an election that, because I don't think they really know. I don't think Trump is trying to flip the thing. I don't think Harris is trying to flip the thing. But the people who pull their strings, get them to come out and want a system that is accessible to everyone, that everyone can see, so everyone can trust it. Because what good is it to be president if only half the country believes in you?
Yeah. And I think you listen, but for people out there watching this, Clint's been fighting this fight for a long time. So when I asked him, what can we do to fix this? You saw that kind of face of him going, geez, Louise, we've been throwing darts at the board for years now. But I think that's the best thing we could do. If you have somebody running, contact that person running, have him challenge the results, have him to ask for an audit, have him save money from his campaign to protest the election if the numbers don't match up right. So we can go in there more. If we dissect these systems each time, look, what happened in Arizona, I think was very helpful because what came out of those courtrooms, I'll never forget, Clint, in the very beginning when they started challenging Kerry Lake's results, it was like, this person's in charge for counting these ballots over here. The pre-ballots, the mail-in ballots before the election day. These people, this division's in charge of counting the mail-in ballots on the day and after the election. These other people are in charge of counting the election, the votes inside the precincts. They have it all discombobulated by design. So the more the people understand what's going on, the more they can say, wait a second, this isn't fair. But I will say this much, and I'll let you just to get the final word. It is very possible to do this and it's an easy thing to have elections in one day, on a Sunday, on a holiday, make it easy for people and very mellifluous and free-flowing for them to vote, not take hours, have results that day counted in front of the public and know who the people chose that night. Finish this off, Clint.
The Netherlands, 2018, called me because they had the Russians getting into their system because the Russians were doing a bad job that year. It's not that they hadn't gotten in before and they haven't gotten in since, but they were getting in that time and they got caught. So they called me and said, what can we do to save our system? And I said, because it comes smarter, like I said, you take the machines, you put them in a box, it has to fit really tight. You tape it up and you throw them in the ocean because you are not keeping anybody out of there that wants in there. Because you may have caught the Russians, but you didn't catch the 27 other countries, including probably us, in there trying to put our finger on the ballot. And I said, you got to get rid of them. That was 6 months before their election. They did it. In 6 months, they threw them away, and they counted by hand, one night, got it done. Everybody knew the results were valid. They didn't do it on video because we have to do it on video because it's been so screwy so long that no one's going to believe anybody. So we have to do beyond. But in the Netherlands, they just did I think eventually they should go to a video system as well. Because if it's valid, what's to hurt? It's kind of like, the cop cam. If you're not doing anything wrong, wear your cop cam. And then we know you're not going to do anything wrong.
Yeah. And I would argue that most of the time that it's oligarchs or the top of the chain within their own country that are cheating these elections. And the whole point is that anybody can cheat it. You can cheat it. He can cheat it. Let's have a system that can't be cheated. Ladies and gentlemen, Clint Curtis, this is the first time in a while he's been on the show. He'll be back. We'll talk elections. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll speak to you later.
Thank you for having me, sir.